G'day and welcome again to another Campfire Project discussion. And today I have, first of all, with me Angela Heise, leadership coach and emotional productivity trainer. How are you, Angela?
Very well, thank you.
Great to have you here.
And see everybody else, yes.
Excellent. And then we have Jayne, who's an education and emotions practitioner and co-founder of Bungie, a platform for free emotional health support. How are you, Lisa?
I'm sensational today, Alan. How are you?
Good, thanks. And then we have Scott Carson, founder of the Sunday Session. G'day, Scott. How are you, mate?
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me on again.
Well, it seems like a bit, very much like old home week, and that lately we're seeing each other quite a bit online, doing some new things. Because before we even start this, guys, if you haven't seen the live that Scott organised yesterday, last evening, go and have a look at it, because Scott's going to be running some lives every Thursday night, 8 o'clock Sydney time. So get online, put your comments in. And Angela and I both had the pleasure of being with Scott last night. So it's really going to go well. Okay. Today we were talking about trust, because at the moment the uncertainty and everything else is a major issue. People aren't relaxing in this particular time. They're already stressed out. And so trust is a major issue for everybody. So I was wondering, well, first of all, Lisa, if you could sort of take us into this conversation today, please.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to do that. Trust is very interesting, because if we could just trust and let go, I think most people would agree that we could just let go and we wouldn't have probably the level of fear and insecurity that we have. What I've noticed in the people that I work with is that often we're unable to trust on the outside when we don't trust ourselves on the inside. And we've been taught for such a long time to meet our needs by reaching out. If we want to be loved more, we often abandon ourselves, or we do things for obligation. We try to people please. And so we're walking away from ourselves quite often. And so how can we feel a sense of even trust in ourselves? Because we often go against our own truth. We might get some intuition or a feeling that we shouldn't do this, but we might go and do it because we think someone expects us to do that. And so we've walked away from what we really need for ourselves. So there's a part of us that doesn't trust us. And I think the more we build trust in who we are and we start to turn within and go, what am I feeling and how can I be fluid in this emotion? How can I use it to decide how I need to act? Because for me, we all have feelings around what's happening now. Like, you can't not have a feeling around it. And it's validating the feeling. And then it's like, okay, so how can I use that feeling to show me what I need to do next? And by using that feeling and acting on it, I actually learn to trust myself. And I know that I'm going to do the right thing for me because I'm acting on what I'm feeling. And I'm actually doing what I need to do in that moment to make myself feel better. And I actually find that the more I trust me, the more I can trust the world to unfold, the more I can trust that, whatever you want to call it, the power greater than ourselves, or whatever you refer to as that thing outside of ourselves that is unfolding, like Mother Nature, if you want to call it Mother Nature, the more I can trust that, because I trust myself. And this is a practice, actually. Like, and you find that you can get this great level of trust in your life, and then something will happen. It's like, oh, I can't trust here. But actually, it's just another opportunity. What am I feeling? Why wouldn't I feel like that? And how can I actually address that feeling so that I can get on and do what I need to do? And then I have a deeper level of trust, and a deeper level, and a deeper level. And you begin to actually live life quite naturally like that, and to be able to let go in that trust, which I think gives us a sense of solidity and unshakable foundations when there's uncertainty and craziness going outside of ourselves. So I actually think it's quite crucial that we have a conversation around trust right now.
Yeah, being your area, Angela, being in emotions and understanding that, what's your take on that as well?
Well, I mean, you've been seeing me probably not the whole time, Lisa was speaking. It's the whole thing of wanting to be in control. We really we don't want to just control ourselves, but we also want to control the environment. And if we can just let go of that control because we can trust ourselves, as Lisa was saying, then you know, there's a lot of energy that is actually freed up to do constructive things. And then we don't have to go into anxiety. We don't have to go into this, is it going to work out? Because I know what I can do. So they call this, there's an internal reference and an external reference. So I can define myself by what's going on for me inside, and I can trust myself, or I can trust that somebody else will take care of me. As Lisa was saying, you know, will somebody take care of my needs? Will somebody make sure that I'm okay? And we're learning to do that at the moment. Supposedly the government is going to take care of us, you know, other people will take care of us. And as long as I'm able to distinguish between what can I control and what can I not control, then I think that really shifts the whole trust thing as well. And as Lisa said, start with trusting yourself. That's absolutely crucial.
And from a male's point of view, especially with the people you've been working with, Scott, what would you say about that?
I think trust is the biggest issue we've got at the minute, because with the band-aid approach to everything, it doesn't work. It gets ripped off. So there's no consistency in our actions. Therefore, there is no trust. You know, one of the things with the guys I work with and the guys that are hurting the most, they don't have a trust. They don't trust anybody. So it's about consistent action, you know, and keeping it consistent. And one of the things I talk about in amongst the dads at the minute is with the kids, you know, any threats or anything like that. As soon as you threaten a kid, you've lost their trust. So it's about keeping consistent in your actions and making sure when you say something, you follow through. So this topic for me is probably the most important one. It's my number one value. You know, trust is everything to me.
I agree with you, Scott. Like I've got a 13-year-old daughter. I've got other older kids, but my 13-year-old daughter at home, and talking about social media and the impact of social media. And one of the things that I have said to her is the most important thing is the trust. So we both agreed on that. Whatever happens, we will never, ever forfeit that trust. And because if you lose that, there's really nowhere else to go, you know, with trust. And I think you're absolutely right. We have to learn how to build trust and intimacy and trust. And I don't mean intimacy in terms of like our personal relationships, like, you know, our love relationship. I mean in terms of everyone in our lives. It so much has to do with trust and how we trust ourselves, and that we can have a feeling, but we don't have to act on it. Like we forget the power that we have, you know, and when we exercise that power, we learn to trust ourselves, you know, especially with kids, because, hey, kids can really push you over the edge.
Well, they are going to push your buttons and that very strongly. But, you know, it's a case of, you know, as you're saying, it's really a reflection of us. If we can't trust other people, then the thing is that it's something in us that we don't trust. And it's finding that and then working out, well, why do I not trust myself? Therefore, I can't trust other people. What do I do about that? You can say, right.
Can I challenge that though for a minute, Alan, if you don't mind if I step in? Because I totally agree that if we have an emotional reaction, there's something in us that needs to be addressed. However, often we do misplace our trust. And I think that we also have to be aware that sometimes we trust where we shouldn't trust. And sometimes we can trust people in some areas, but not others. And that's why it's so important to come back to how we feel. So sometimes it's not right to trust other people. You know, there are people out there that might abuse our trust. And we know the difference because we'll have an emotional reaction. So if there's something happening inside you, that's when you have to look within and go, well, why is it that I can't trust now?
Yeah, well, trust is an outcome. It's always going to be the emotion that's up front in the first place.
I think our trust is being really tested at the moment because we need to examine where we actually trust and where we don't, and where we need to increase our trust. Like I talk to a lot of people at the moment, like my clients who are leaders start saying things like, how can I trust that they're actually doing the work when they're at home and not just Netflixing the next 2 seasons of this episode? How can I trust that they're actually creating the results? Because I have lost control. I can't really supervise them. I can't really see. And those are things that were, you know, just taken for granted. There was communication while people were working together. You could just talk to somebody and saying, how are you going with this? And all of a sudden that's gone. So and again, how can I trust that somebody is healthy? You know, can I actually stand 1.5 meters away from them and go, you know, you're safe enough to stand this close? So trust has gained dimensions that a few weeks ago we have never even thought about.
It's interesting that, because I think with as a guy who used to employ a lot of employees, trust comes from ownership, and you have to give them the ownership and trust that they do that. Then it comes back. You have to give it first. You can't just ask for it. So in everything that I deal with now inside the guys, there's a rather large incident I had the other day, and it was a pretty heavy one, and I had to walk through police and calm a guy down. I looked at him in the eyes and I said, can I trust you right now? Because I need to know that I'm safe. And he did. And it was the most amazing thing ever, because here he is in fear and pain. And because I trusted him, I was able to receive it. So you've got to give it to get it.
But you gave it consciously. So
Absolutely.
that's the difference. It was a conscious intention to give trust. Often people don't consciously intend it. They just give it where perhaps it's going to be abused, or where they put themselves in a position to be hurt.
Yeah, I will trust first. I will trust first. You have my trust. It's up to you to break it. It's not my responsibility for you to. It's not my responsibility what you do with it. You have my trust. You can do what you like with it. It's no reflection on me. It's a reflection on you. I will make my choices upon your reactions to what I do. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It's conscious. Yeah.
Conscious, is it? Oh, okay. I'm learning.
Yeah.
Like it's awareness, isn't it? Like it's an aware thing that you're doing. It's an aware action that you're taking.
Yeah, I love it when people say trust has to be earned, and I say, well, let's pretend that trust is a bank account. Is there actually any money in the account yet when somebody starts building a relationship with you? No, they have to earn it. Well, it's a money metaphor. And I go, so if they do anything, just the tiniest thing that you say deserves not to trust them while you're building the relationship, when things are still wobbly, you're going to go into the red immediately. And it's going to get really difficult to get out of that. So can you give them some credit? I mean, I love how we've got all of these money metaphors around, trust and building relationships. Give people some credit, and then keep adding in, and it's a conscious choice. I mean, if somebody violates my trust, well, there's going to be money or credit taken out. But initially, there's a conscious choice of, I will trust this person until proven otherwise.
It's interesting. I often call that the fudge factor too, because we're human. And so it doesn't matter how aware we are, we sometimes are going to stop up.
Oh,
and,
gosh,
and that's what you're saying. It's like you have to allow there's going to be this fudge factor when you're trusting people, but you would hope that the communication sort of works with all that sort of stuff.
Well, there's a big difference between somebody who says, I've got a really big bank account with that person now, and I'm just going to withdraw, because, family members often do that. Because you love me, I can behave like the biggest ass, and you will still trust me. But if I am conscious of that, there will come a time where I go, maybe not. Maybe I don't want to trust you that much anymore. And that's the conscious choice also in a relationship. It's two people making sure that there's always enough trust going. And if the person violates that for whatever reason, hopefully they've got the ability to say, you know what, I've just screwed up. Yeah, I'm sorry. Let me start again.
It comes down to personal responsibility. Earning trust. I don't think that's the case at all. As you've said, it's a matter of, as Scott has said, give that trust, and the person then, by their behaviour, either maintains that trust or they lose the trust. It's not something they have to earn up front. It's like respect. I'll give somebody respect, but for them to keep that respect, they have to keep being worthy of that respect. If they break the respect, then it's gone. So it's something that's given to you, but then it's up to you to actually maintain it. So as Scott says, trust people and then see what their reaction is. If they behave in a certain way, go, well, that's them, it's not me. But you don't get rid of your own trust for other people, but just for that one person, you go, well, as you've said, Angela, the bank account's empty. Yeah. And once the trust is lost, it's not a matter of saying, oh, I'm sorry. I really get annoyed when I hear these people saying, oh, it's better to go ahead and do something than ask for forgiveness later. I go, no, once you do that, you've lost the trust. How do you earn that back when there's always going to be that doubt that you can be trusted? And so you've got to be conscious about it.
Yeah, so I just listening to that, because one of the things that's sitting in my head right now is, how do you get that trust back? And I'm just going back through certain scenarios at the minute where I'm bringing that trust back from where things have been broken. And the only way in which I have found you can do that is to go into the situation and understand that. Respect yourself enough and the person enough, and actually go back into that pain for them, and then try and break it down. Like, it's funny because I've just had a big emotional thing, which some of you may have seen, with my father. And, you know, there's not a lot of trust. But because I've gone deep into the situation with him, and he's opened up and I've opened up, and we're owning our emotions and we're sharing a journey, we've gone back in to learn from each other. There's a possibility of trust being built up again. You know, yeah. So the only way I can see that to happen is to learn the situation that actually broke the trust in the first place. If that makes sense.
Because as you knew before you had that discussion with him, you didn't know the background of why he was the way he was. But when you learn that, then you go, now I know more. So you make a new decision based on the new information you've got.
Correct.
So that then can go, okay, I understand that. I can understand why you did that. Yes, I can now trust you. And again, then you, through that, your understanding, then can turn around and give that trust to the other person.
It's interesting though, because that comes back to your trust of self, doesn't it? Which is what we started with. It's like, so for me, I've been in situations like my first relationship was very codependent, and I continued to trust where it wasn't safe to trust, because that was my pattern. So I learned that unless that person owned their emotional reactions and owned and grew themselves, it was very unsafe for me to trust that person. And my tendency is to, once time passes, things will be great. And, you put yourself in a position to be hurt again, because you expect that that person has changed or grown. But that was never actually my experience in that instance. So I learnt that we need to trust ourselves to look after our well-being, which is very much about just getting in touch with our emotional, because our emotions always tell us whether it's safe or not. And often we don't listen to it. And we might reach out and expect to be able to trust and be open, even if it feels a bit funny for us. And for me, I learnt that I needed to not put myself in a position to be hurt, because in that instance, that person didn't actually change his behavior. He never owned his part in that. So we have to trust ourselves to look after our well-being. And I think that's very much sort of where we started at in this conversation too. It's like, how much can we trust ourselves to be in control of our well-being, like mental, emotional, physical, social, because ultimately it's our responsibility, because it's inside of us that it's all happening, Yeah.
Well, that's very apt to what just happened with my father, because I've had that conversation years ago, there's no way I could have trusted myself to go in there and be objective and actually learn from it. So I've had to go on self journey and actually be able to completely trust myself to be able to sit there and present, and when I say present, I mean present myself in a way that's going to be calm and work through things. So definitely a self journey before others.
It's so healing.
Yeah. It always comes back to ourselves. It's never the outside. We're going to make if we're going to make decisions, we need to know where we are. We need to have checked all that out first before we can step forward and expect anything from anybody else. Like, talking about when somebody's pointing the finger at everybody else, saying, they're to blame, there's those three fingers pointing back at the person that right there at themselves. What have you done about checking yourself first? And as you were saying, Lisa, it's, you've got to analyze yourself. You've got to look at those. Well, if you want to get a solution, there are certain things you have to do. I'm not saying that everyone has to go and do it, because, again, it's a matter of choice. They may not want to do it. But if they do want to do it, they, have better trust with people. They need to look at themselves first, because, as you said, you've got to have that foundation in place first before you can worry about what's outside of you.
Could I ask a question, which I think would be really beneficial for us to discuss, if you guys don't mind me
Go for it.
in here? I think we've talked a lot about trust of self and how important that is. I think it would be really helpful if maybe you shared and like what you would do to build that trust, like what tips or what hacks, you know, that's the really cool word to use now, is it? What hacks could you use if it all comes down to our trust of self? What are your suggestions for building that?
For building trust in ourselves or with others?
Yeah.
In ourselves.
Yeah, like what have you done? Like if looking back on your story, what is it that you've done that you've actually been able to build that trust in yourself?
I've taken risks, and not stupid ones, but I've taken risks, and I've grown risks over time. You know, it's like, I mean, let me put it this way. I didn't jump out of it's like saying, oh, I'm going to jump out of an airplane when I don't even know how to get to the 5th floor because I'm afraid of heights. But it was just about taking more and more risks and putting myself out there, getting out of my comfort zone and not staying in the same kind of familiar environment. You know, like I get up at that time in the morning, I have my cup of coffee, and then I do this, and then I do this, and then I come home from work, and then I sit down at the same table, have the same kind of food, watch the same TV shows, and then go to bed and sleep on the same side of the bed. But about varying things and really just going, this really, you know, this is different. So I practice stretching myself into doing something new every year. So I've done really crazy courses and stuff where, I mean, I utterly and miserably failed, you know, where I just went, this is definitely not for me. But I overcame my fear of heights. And, you know, I went abseiling. I had a fear of horses. I started horse riding. I did a course in mathematics because I hated mathematics, still hate mathematics, really not for me. But I, you know, like just stretching and looking, and then not with the intention of becoming an expert, but just about going, okay, this is just fun and stretching, and you know, and going into other countries, not knowing the language. So it's just for me, it was just about going, I'm not perfect. I never want to be perfect. I want to be a work in progress, and I want to be able to make mistakes, and I want to feel good about it and laugh about myself. And I don't care what people think about me. Doesn't matter, as long as I feel good about what I do. And again, it's also with the integrity to go, oh, I screwed up. I hurt this person, you know, and then saying, how can I make amends? So that would be my recipe.
That's a great recipe.
Yeah, I agree. I pretty much bang on with Angela with that. Consistent effort is the best way to build trust in yourself. Consistently trying new things, failing forward. You know, last night for me, you know, like it's consistent effort, trying new things, you know, like once you've failed a lot, you get less fear of failing. So you trust that you can get through to the next thing. Like I'll never forget. And I don't know if I mentioned last thing I did with Andy Bryce as a member of the panel, 3 days it took us to get a Facebook Live up. And, you know, we're talking about failing forward. You couldn't have got a better subject. But we built the trust in ourselves that we can keep going, you know, and unfortunately travel's been cut down at the minute, but I think traveling and one of the best things for me was going to countries where I can't speak the language. And I used to love it. As long as I could say yes, no, and thank you, I'd get by. Big smile and away you go. So a consistent effort. Yeah, but well put, Angela.
Yeah, very much around the taking action, because if you don't take action, nothing's going to happen. And, you know, I've travelled overseas. I've been to Spain where I don't speak Spanish. I've landed there and no one else with me. I travelled on my own with all true faith that I'd get across to the other side, to Gibraltar, where I needed to go. And I just walk up, you know, I just believe that things are going to work out. They always do. It's without doing it in a state of saying, oh, I'll always be right, being blind with it. I'm always, you know, I'm going to be observant. I'm going to take check of where I am. I'm going to, if I do trust somebody, I'm going to be looking for signs when I can't trust them. So I'll give it and then see if they do anything. You know, profiling people makes it so much easier because I can watch, I can see if things don't fit. But like Angela, you know, I'm scared of heights, so I took up skydiving. Still can't stand on a 6-foot step ladder, but I can throw myself out of a plane without any problems. You know, I've done all these things, and it's a case of, yep, step outside that. But I know that that's another thing I've ticked off the bucket list. I don't need to do that anymore. But the whole thing was that trialing and doing new things, if you keep doing what you've always done, it's not going to change. So the first thing is most important is to take action, but don't do it blindly without any thought, because you know that, you know, it's like stepping off the edge of a building and just expecting that there's a ledge down below. Well, most of the time there's not going to be one. You're going to crash. But the whole thing is to go, okay, yeah, I'm going to do this. What's the worst thing that could happen? What's the best thing that could happen? Well, the best thing is I'm going to get to where I want to go. The worst thing that can happen is I'm going to be delayed. There'll be somebody, you know, who can I go and talk to? So I've been able to structure situations. So I've had trust in myself, that I knew that, and I also had trust in others, in the general population, that I would have somebody there who could help. So I've never really gone into a situation where I've been totally blind.
It's so interesting, because I asked that question, right? And I love how you think your perception is like everyone's perceptions. Like, I love that. I always laugh at that. And I think that going, because it's so true. It's like and I remember in my 20s, I did a lot of that stuff, you know, like just doing crazy things and going, oh, actually, I'm all right. I can do that. But I would have answered that question differently, like from the inside. Like, I totally get what you're saying, because you need to be able to do that. But for me, I think I built trust in myself only when I stopped doing things that put myself in a position to feel resentment or feel hurt or feel lost or feel. So it was even things like having the guts to speak up to my mum about some of the things that she did that made me feel uncomfortable, that weren't in my truth. And like, that was hard. The first time my lip was quivering, you know. But when I started doing that stuff, it was like, wow, I've got my back. You know, I can trust myself because I'm not allowing this behavior. And I really found that like just really being there for me and not abandoning myself to keep other people happy. Like, when you put your hand up to do things and then all of a sudden you realize this is not for me, actually saying something, you know, those little things for me were such a big personal trust builder.
Well, I think it's great that you spoke up early, because I ran. I left Germany because I was stuck in a position. My family had very, very strong convictions about who I should be, what my life should look like, and what I should be doing. And I had a very different idea of what my life would be like. And speaking up really got me into strife. So I stopped and I just went away. And I decided that I was going to build my own life away from that environment until I could trust myself to go back in again and stand on my own 2 feet and hold my own. And
I did that too, though. I had to move away until I could come back with enough strength to actually say, yeah.
And I think that's okay. You know, a lot of people think that they have to stay in the same environment and they have to battle it out. No. And I actually say to people, no, you don't. I mean, build trust in yourself by going, how can I do this on my own without caring about what other people think? You know, because that's often what holds us back from taking risks and trusting ourselves, because that's that other relatedness, that, you know, that other people's opinion is more important than my own.
Yeah.
And if that means, you know, cutting off for a while and seeing how I can do standing on my own 2 feet, that makes such a big difference.
Well, that's just like taking you're in a battle, you're in a battle and it's, you know, regrouping, steps back to just.
But also, you can't often heal those things. You can't often change behavior from the same dynamic. And like, I think we talked about this the other day, when you're in a dynamic that you've been living in with somebody for all those years, it's very challenging to change it from within that dynamic. You actually have to step outside of the dynamic and live in the solution so that you can look back and decide how you're going to address that. You know, if you're there, it's very hard to shift the dynamic.
That's it. When you step out of something, do I step out of it to regroup so I can look at this differently with get new knowledge? Or have I stepped out of it because I'm running away? Well, you know what that is, and that's when that level of trust will either go up or it will go down. But as you said, in all of our cases and that, we've all pushed the envelope a little bit further. It was taking action. It was actually extending ourselves a little bit. And when we extend ourselves, we actually go, geez, I can do that. That creates trust that, okay, I did that. What else can I do? We're willing to experiment and do a little bit more, push it a little bit further and a bit further. And then we find out that the envelope that we've been in was a very small version that we created for ourselves, but what was really there was much bigger. We just weren't aware of it. So when we trust ourselves, we start to see the world as a not so much a fearful place, but a place where we can extend ourselves more and get out and do a lot more.
Yeah. And that's why I think, I'm waiting for the panic. I'm waiting for the anxiety and the fear and all of that to kick in, because I'm just not feeling it. And it's not that I'm sitting here and going, oh, it's clappy, everything's going to be wonderful and fine, and this too shall pass, in the sense of, oh, it's not going to matter. But I'm much more in a place of, I know I can deal with this. I know what I can do and what I'm capable of. And what's more important right now is for me to be able to support people around me and support myself in the best way possible, and make the best of the situation and use it as an opportunity to grow. Because I have had situations that were far worse than this. And I know that sounds really ridiculous, but it wasn't a virus, but there were circumstances where I thought, I'm not going to survive this. And I did.
Yeah, because it comes down to, like, for you to say that, if anybody else got upset about it, I'll be going, why are they getting upset? Because your life is different to the next person's. Different. Each of our lives are all different to each other. So what affects each of us will be different. So, but, as you said, you're waiting for that to kick in, because at the moment, the things that are around you, you can't see those as a problem because you have different eyes that you're looking at the whole thing with, as opposed to somebody else. What I'm thinking about is the number of people I've spoken to, that I've heard on social media and everything else, that have just stopped completely. They're in that state of fear. They're waiting to see what happens. So obviously they've got less trust in themselves than they've got of the forces outside of them that they don't trust in the first place. Because you ask any of them about politicians or anything else, they're going to rubbish them. And you go, but you're trusting them when you don't trust yourself. So as you said, Lisa, it always comes back to trust has to be started at home, inside you.
Yeah, if it's all right for a sec, I'm just going to go back to Lisa for a sec, just because the empowerment of saying no. So, because I teach my son that no is the worst word in the English dictionary. And I'll explain that, because I believe if you're going to say no to me, that's fine, but I want you to give me an explanation. Don't just say no, because it puts a full stop on the end of a conversation. If you explain, no, I don't like that because of this reason, it gives us an opportunity to grow. So I want to thank you for saying, no, I'm not going to accept this. Do you know what I mean? Because you extended beyond the no, and you empowered yourself. I saw how that works. So I'm going to take that and sit with that for a bit, because I want to see how that, because my biggest growth corridor is my son. It's like, you hear me talk about him all the time. I love it. It's great fun, but I believe my job on this planet right now is to be the best role model I can be for him. Everything else falls around that. And so I want to thank you for that, because it's something
that took me a long time to learn, that I don't have to accept unacceptable behavior. And the more I stopped accepting unacceptable behavior, the more emotional courage and strength that I built inside of myself. And we're actually conditioned to accept unacceptable behavior. We actually allow so much of that in our societies. And the thing is, we need to have emotional strength and courage to be able to stop accepting it. And we don't have a lot of strength and courage emotionally, like inside ourselves, because we're such a head-based society. We haven't really reclaimed all of our power. We shut down so much of ourselves to exist because we're taught the way we're structured, the dynamics of our relationships. So for me, that was a really massive thing, not accepting unacceptable behavior, and learning to just say to people, this doesn't feel right for me. And actually, you don't have to give an explanation, just by saying, actually, it just doesn't feel right for me right now, because they can't argue that.
Yeah, that in itself is the explanation. That's the only explanation that's needed. Anything beyond that, you're justifying yourself. You've given the explanation, hey, it just doesn't feel right to me. They'd have no right to analyse that any further. I mean, you don't need to actually make a comment back.
but we learn that it's not okay to just say no. I mean, I know that as a child and as a teenager, anytime I put a boundary in place and said, this doesn't feel right, I would be overruled. This is what you will do. This is the role we have assigned to you. And so therefore you will comply. And I remember that this is like you, Lisa. I mean, the putting boundaries in place and actually saying no to unacceptable behavior and not risking, and knowing that, you know, I wasn't risking disapproval, or I didn't care about risking disapproval because my approval of myself mattered so much more. But I remember the very first time I said to somebody, you know what, the kind of behavior that I've just observed, that's a total deal breaker for me.
Yeah.
If this is a typical behavior that you have on a regular basis, this is not going to be a relationship that's going to last. So this is,
you need emotional strength and courage to be able to say that. And that's why it's so important that we build that in our society. Yeah. Like, we haven't been taught that as kids.
Yeah. I keep saying all the time, and that as parents, we're not sculptors and we're not carpenters. Our job is not to turn our kids into something, which is what you were saying, Angela, your parents tried to do with you. Our job as parents is we're gardeners. Our job is to nurture and, the child so they grow into the best version of themselves. And in that, they should be able to then be able to talk to us, to explain like Oscar does with you, Scott, and go, hey, Dad, no, I don't agree with that because of this reason. And that reason might just be, as you said, Lisa, it doesn't feel right for me. And
I've had to hold space to allow him to have a voice, though. Like I've had to work on me to give him that
exactly.
voice.
And to not feel threatened by his response too. Like, a lot of people feel threatened by their kids' responses.
Yeah. So inside, like, I feel like I'm so lucky because inside all his mates at school and that, I get all the high fives, and it's building trust inside people isn't just your words. It's your consistent physical actions. Like, I walk through the school, I'm giving kids high fives. I see them. Seeing somebody allows them to trust you. I love the book, Richard Reed, If I Could Tell You Just One Thing, because he talks about Bill Clinton, like him or not, is irrelevant, but it's about his number one thing is Sawu Bona. I see you. It's the Zulu term for I see you. And he felt his job was to see everybody, to see the kid in the back of the classroom that wasn't getting any attention, to see the couple over the back smiling, and just go and spend some time with them because they wouldn't normally talk. And I personally think, and that's something I've taken into my life that I just hold so dearly. I see you. I want to go to you and I want to understand you. So I think that's probably the biggest way you can build trust. And it takes effort to do that. But once you go and spend time with people and like if you see a homeless guy, don't just walk past, say good day. They'll look up at you. They'll be in shock. But the look in their eye is worth it. Yeah. And if as you build courage, you'll be able to find time to go and talk to them. And then you'll hear them. And that'll build your trust. Yeah. So, sorry.
What you're saying then, Scott, like I totally am on the same page with you there. And I'd just like to expand on what you've said, because you've obviously done a lot of work on yourself, because in order for you to see someone as they are in this moment, you need to approach them with no judgment and no perception. So judgment is when I'm coming from fear, and it's actually like you're substituting the life experience of them in that moment for what you think they are, right? Which is a fear-based reaction. And you need to have really looked at yourself emotionally and why you have these judgments you're projecting and your perceptions, and worked on that and owned that in yourself to be able to just stand there with a person and see them as they are, how they turn up today, and just accept them as they are. And that is such a gift. It's such a gift, because people just it's like drinking in this incredible, beautiful, golden nourishment when people do that for them. Like, it is such a gift that you do for people.
Thank you. I'll accept it, but it's only because I know my pain and I have no shame behind it. I used to run from it. I would never talk about what happened. Only once I actually got through that. I've got a beautiful client at the moment that's been through more than anyone deserves. But he's gorgeous. I just want him to see that. Then when he does, he's going to be able to sit with people better than I ever will be able to. but it's because we just got to own our story. Owning your story. Maybe that's as simple as that. Own your story. It happened as you saw it happen. That's it.
But
No other judgment.
And there's a big difference between owning your story and being your story.
Mm.
Because if I am my story, I can easily become a victim. And I go, this is the way I am. I call that the drama queen tiara. You know, it's like, oh, I am what I am because when I own my story, I've dropped the judgment. I go, shit happens. I am what I am because of this. I'm hugely grateful for what I've gone through, because I wouldn't be who I am right now if I hadn't. And I'm very happy with myself. So therefore, you know, whatever happened was a good thing.
Yeah. Jung talks about universes, you know, like, so that universe of being the victim and the blame and the fear paralysis, like you mentioned, Alan, because I felt that, like I had a marriage or partnership breakup last May, and I went through these stages. And the first stage was fear paralysis, where you can't move off the bed, where you can't eat, where you can't see a future. And I'm sure there's some people that are in that crisis stage of fear right now. And then from that point, and you realize that most of the reason you're in that place is the thoughts and the story that you're attaching to the emotions that you're feeling. And by recognizing that, being able to shift into a little bit of acceptance. Okay, I'm accepting what's happening. I might not like it, but I'm accepting. And then you move into the third universe, which Jung calls the universe of gold, where you actually have accepted and you've gone, well, actually, this is just how it is, and you're more accepting. And then you go into this place where you just go, this is the best freaking thing that's ever happened to me. Yay! Right? And that's what you do. But you've got to be willing to do it, okay? Because the first couple of days of fear paralysis, well, in my case, that's what it was. I know people spend a lot of time in fear, but it actually, you can move through it fairly fast when you recognize that, yeah, you're going to feel that for a little while, but hey, you can move out of it, just acceptance. And then, you know, and it shifts. You're shifting into another universe. You're moving your whole being into another universe. And I tell you what, when you get to that goal, whew.
Yeah. But what you said is it's the acceptance that it doesn't have to be wonderful and beautiful and, you know, what I call happy clappy all the time. There is, you know, and again, also with trust, and that's the trusting myself, is I know that I can feel depressed and sad and upset and all of that. But if I push it down, it's going to start festering. But if I allow myself to say, you know what, it really sucks right now.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm just going to own that, as Scott said, and then I'm going to let it go. Instead of building a drama story around it that I tell 50 people about, and then it becomes my story, and then I'm living it, and then I'm the victim. You know, that's when, I mean, I find it really hard when they ask me, so are you divorced or single? And I go, who cares? You know, because when I start owning a label like divorced, I mean, people go, oh, there's all sorts of judgment that happens. You know, so why?
I went through a lot of judgment when I had my first divorce, because now I was divorced. Then they found out I was raising 3 boys on my own, so their impression of me completely switched the other way. Then when she needed somewhere to stay, you know, many, many years later, and she needed something, I had a spare room, and she said, you know, I stayed with you for 3 months. You end up cohabitating with me for 3.5 years. And now people thought I was crazy. So all these different things that they went through, but all of those decisions I made were based on the fact of looking at what was I really feeling? What was the good that came out of things? What was the bad? To have my ex-wife, who had left me with 3 boys to raise on my own, to then have her cohabitate, I just looked from the point of view that what I got out of that relationship with 3 boys I love and respect. So therefore I could look at her differently. So everything that happens in our lives, we can immediately switch it and go, what was a good thing in here? It takes practice, because when you're in the middle of it, it's like being in grief. It's hard to think of anything else outside of that. But the more that we practice that with the smaller things in our lives, because a loss of somebody, and that is different to having lost a partner. That's a lot more severe than losing a partner. But the more you do it with all the little things in your life, the more that it's like any muscle, you're building it up. You're building strength. And so it then becomes a lot easier. So when you are in a state of grief or great fear and everything else, you're able to step back from it and go, hang on, what's the bigger picture here? What can I get out of this? Where can it take me? What's the alternatives? Do I have to think this way, or can I think in a different way? It's just practice. So anybody out there could say, oh, it's all right for you guys, you've been through these things. But at the end of the day, it's a case of, yeah, we've been through it. In my case, I can speak for myself, I wasn't very good at it. I screwed it up that many times. But now it becomes easier for me.
But also, you probably still have bad days. Like, there's some days that I'm just like, you know what? Like, I'm just like so not myself today. I'm just what I'm getting under the doona, and you know, just.
But
like,
that's you. That's yourself.
Yeah, it's like it's normal, isn't it? Like we're in a human body. We're always going to feel stuff, you know.
Yeah, but again, are you getting under the doona for the next 3 weeks, or are you going, I'm allowing myself to really wallow for the next few hours and really enjoy being in my, you know, in my wallow, and then get out of bed again and get going. It's like, it's the Oriah Mountain, what's her name? Oriah Mountain Dreamer. She's got this beautiful poem called The Invitation, you know, and it's about, will you be able to get up in the next morning and feed the children, even though it's been a terrible night? It's a beautiful poem. If you get a chance to read it, it's called The Invitation.
Okay,
that's what it's all about.
And that's the thing.
Yeah.
If everybody who's listening to this, if we get the message across, is that you're going to have good days, you're going to have bad days. How long you stay in those bad days is your decision. And how you get through those days faster is by the practice that you do with all the little things that are happening. I have some disaster days. I guarantee I'm going to have a lot more disaster days as life goes on. But how long do I stay in those is determined by the practice that I've done leading up to that, and the awareness I have at that time, and also the people I have around me and the discussions I'm having.
It's true. I had an opportunity today with my teenage daughter who was feeling very, very sad. And like, I think she really wanted to wallow in it. And I'm like, how about we just go for a walk? And we got down the bottom of my apartment block, and there's a little, in our foyer, there's a little space you can sit. And I'm like, just sit down there. And I said, how about you just leave all the sadness here, right? We're just going to go out and have a good time. And when we come back in, we'll pick it up, and you can take it with you if you want back into your bedroom. And she's like, oh, Mum, you're just such a dag. Like, that's just so stupid. And I go, well, let's just try it, you know? So anyway, she's like, and leaves it there. We went off. We had an awesome time. Walked straight past it when we went to get in the lift. Totally forgot about it, you know. So it was just moving. You know what I mean? Sometimes you do these role-playing things, and like it sort of works. As silly as it is.
It's amazing when daggy stuff does work, because you're vulnerable. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's, hey, let's just try this. And when you lead and you give other people permission to step into that place, that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, it's all those little pattern interrupts. You've always done it this way, and then all of a sudden you throw something else in which is completely different to it, and you just break the cycle.
I like that, pattern interrupt. Yeah, that's good.
First time before I started learning NLP, I signed up for a course, and the instructor lived at the IBIS Centre down in Sydney, and right outside his window, because he had his training centre just next door, right outside his window, the monorail went past. And I just gone through my second divorce. And he got me to start telling him the story about my divorce. And I guarantee I was telling the same story I told to everybody else over and over again in the past. And I'm right at that emotional point. Monorail goes past the window, and he goes, oh, you ever been on the monorail? He said, that goes past. He was telling me the times and everything else. It's like, hang on, I'm right in the middle of something. And he insisted on turning into a conversation. If you haven't been on it, you should get on it. You should go for a run, because it goes around this state. And then he turns around and he goes, okay, finish your story from where you were. And I couldn't, because the emotion I'd been, because I told the same story, the emotions built up in exactly the same way, and all those points were identical that I've told before. Now it wasn't. And it was like, I actually wanted to hit him because I thought, you screwed up my little story I've been telling over and over. I can't tell it anymore.
It's very, very clever.
Yeah. I love pattern interrupts. Because but if, you know, let me put it this way, if somebody's really intent on keeping the victim and keeping the story, they'll pick it back up again. But it's about taking the opportunity and go, you know what, I've done that. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've got friends. I mean, I remember telling one friend a story, and he looked at me and he said, story again, same one. And it was like, oh God, you're absolutely right. You know, and it came from a really loving place, but he's like, you're done with that one, aren't you? You're hanging on to stuff that is totally gone. It's history. So why, bring it back up again? But we do, because we get a lot of brownie points for it.
Yeah, well, you become the story, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's where the ownership, and it's not until you get somebody else outside of your story to actually, with any story, it's yours until you share it, and then they will look at it and see it in a different set of eyes because of their experience, and therefore give you another alternative. Only when you see that alternative can you get that shift. And I think as people who help other people, I think that's what we do better than anything else. We just sit there, we hold the space, we hear the story, we see what's going on, and then we go, okay, have you seen it like this? Look for the gratitude in things. Look for different opportunities. And I think only those that have worked through scenarios themselves and actually been through the pain get to see things like that. So I'm actually, crazy enough, but I'm looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to seeing so many people reevaluate their lives. And, I'm loving seeing people at the minute give stuff for free. There's a one-on-one I've just done with Roland, should be coming up in the next couple of days. And she works for Inspire Tribe, and she's amazing, it's all about how you see things, and it's just, I think we're all the same. So, so I'm off the tangent again. I'll get off my tangent.
That's good. I think it's interesting, and I just reminded me of something that became so clear to me over my experiences in the last 8 to 10 months, was that there's a big difference between the feeling we have and the story. It's almost like when we add our thoughts and our story to our feelings, we have suffering. And that became so clear to me, because I recognized that if I could stop my thinking, and I used things like, I actually learned the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, and I said it over and over and over again so that my thinking wasn't going to the story. And then I just noticed I'd feel these feelings, but because I wasn't attaching the thoughts or the story to it, there was no suffering. There was pain, but the pain was moving and there wasn't suffering. And it was so clear to me. I'm just like, wow, that is so cool. Because if you allowed the feeling without the story, you could actually feel it move through your body. Like I was feeling grief. And a couple of months later, the grief would come up again and I'd be like, oh, there's grief. But I didn't go, oh, that was because he did this or that. I just went, oh, there's grief, and that recognition was very, very, was so clear for me.
And that's the difference between the story and naming the emotion.
That's it.
And a lot of people don't know how they feel. I talk to people and I say, how are you feeling? Good. My favorite is good, pretty good, not too bad, pretty bad, shit house. And then my favorite is, of course, fine. Fucked up, irrational, neurotic, emotionally unavailable. Yeah. Don't talk to me. Leave me alone. But when I have my feelings, when I can say, as you said, I'm feeling grief right now, or I'm feeling frustration, and I think that's what's happening at the moment a lot, is people don't know exactly how they feel. But if I can label it, if I can say, I know this is grief, I know this is frustration, I know this is anxiety, it doesn't become a story, it becomes something I can change, because emotions change very quickly. We literally change emotions chemically every few seconds, very quickly. We just have to make the decision, changes the chemistry, we change. But when we start thinking around what's going on and getting sucked into the drama, then it becomes, the more we practice this, the more our biology adjusts to it. We become that. And then all of a sudden we have an identity and a personality that is that, ooh, there's that angry person, or I'm such a sad person, or whatever it might be. Yeah, and that's not useful.
Yeah. So if you had one piece of advice to give to other people, what would it be? Lisa?
It would be, start to pay attention to what you're feeling. Just feel, just really get in touch and see that feeling as your best friend, because it's actually showing you what you need to do to stop feeling that. If I feel loneliness, that means I've got to go out and be friendly or make some friends, right? So that emotion actually shows us what we need to do next. Your best friend.
Excellent. Angela?
I would take what you've said and continue, because when you know how you're feeling and you can identify the feelings, you know where you're feeling grief, you know where you feel sadness, you know what frustration feels like. When something doesn't feel right, when something feels really weird, that's your intuition speaking, then you can make a much better decision. But if I don't know how I feel because I don't know what it is that I'm feeling, then I'm probably going to get sucked into the approval seeking, the culturally appropriate behavior. This is what people do. I don't want to upset the apple cart, whatever it might be. I might go along. But if I don't have the label good or bad around emotions, it's just an emotion.
Excellent. And Scott?
Write it down. Pen and paper, write it down. Whatever you're going through at the minute, write it down. Pen and paper. There's a connection between hand and pen, that when you write it down, you're taking the emotion out of it, then reread it. See how it feels.
As soon as you get out of, because your visual's your highest frequency, your thinking's running berserk. When you're writing, you slow down because you can't write as fast as you can think. So you've got to slow it down, which causes then the emotion to be dissipated a little bit, so you can be a little bit more present in the situation.
I wish someone had told me that ages ago, because I just try to write as fast as I think, and it's an absolute mess.
Yeah.
So I'm going to write slower.
The important thing is when you're writing, because the emotion and all of that, that's also why you never want to send an email when you're upset.
Yes, absolutely. No emails, no texts. That's right.
Nothing.
Don't text emotion.
From them straight
Write
away.
it down for yourself, walk away, have a cup of tea, come back.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with emails because I can't get the stamp to stick in the corner. I'm still having trouble with it, so I just don't get there. Sorry.
When it comes to trust, and if people want some techniques in how to do it, is we don't want to feel, or we don't feel angry, we don't want to feel all of those emotions. And at trust, we're going, well, I don't know why if I can trust the person. Well, I always say, well, what would your life be like if you could trust them? What would your life be like if you could trust yourself? How would that be different? So when I work with people with their, they go, oh, I don't like the way I'm thinking. And I go, well, you're not going to change the way you're thinking by thinking about it. So how does that make you feel? And they go, oh, it makes me feel like crap. And I go, rightio, well, if you don't like thinking that way, you don't like feeling that way, what would be another way that you'd like to feel? Tell us about that. And they tell you a couple of things. You go, right, and this is where you bring all the senses in. Who are you going to be with? What are you going to be saying? What are you going to be smelling? Olfactory, gustatory, and all the rest of it. I love walking down the beaches. Oh, soft sand, hard sand, in the water's edge. What is it? What are you smelling? What are you hearing? I hear the waves crashing and all the rest of it. And as soon as they get into that, they go into positive thoughts. So using that same technique, when you're looking about, I don't trust the person, well, if you could, and if you can see that person in that role with you, trusting them, then obviously you can have trust with them. But if you've done that with yourself first, you always do it with yourself first. As you said, Lisa, you've got to do it with yourself, because if you don't have trust for yourself, you can't have trust for someone else. Because if you don't know how to experience yourself, how can you experience it with somebody else? So to take that time is always going to be, and I've always used that technique, and people have changed their thinking immediately, and they've changed their health, and they go, but you're going to tell me, help me figure out where all the physical injuries or whatever I had, because it was a physical injury or a thing like cancer, and they've removed their cancers when they've actually reversed the situation, when they've got into the thought process, because they've changed their thinking, therefore it's changed the chemical reactions in their body, which have fed the cells. Then they've said to me, well, you said when we started we're going to find out where the cancer came from, and I went, yeah, I lied to you. And they go, what? I said, because if I told you what we were going to do, you would have said no and walked out the door. But now, if you want to find out where it came from, you've got to go back through your good thoughts, your good feelings, across to the bad feelings, to go back up to the old thoughts. Oh, forget it. So we don't have to punish ourselves in the process. And one of the ways is to visualize having that relationship with somebody, having that relationship with yourself. How would that change everything around me? Yeah. And it's a nice little exercise to do, because it's not going to be nasty. It's always going to go to the positive. It looks like the internet's starting to crash. So we've just lost Lisa.
It's that time of night where everything's going a bit sideways, I think.
I think we're going to see a lot more of this with the the internet and with everybody working from home.
And with school holidays coming.
Yep. Well, you know, I'm on the board of the Montessori Primary School, and we've already stopped. We're going to school holidays already. There's a lot of schools that are doing that. There's some schools where they're telling me even though they're open, they've got no students. So there's it's going to get worse over the next few weeks as all of them go out, and we've got more and more people jumping online, trying to do their work and everything else. G'day, we're back.
Yeah. Well, and this is where trusting yourself is even more important, because when all the connections start wobbling and when people disappear, you know, if you don't trust yourself, it's going to get very difficult.
That's it. Yeah, we were just talking about when you dropped out, Lisa, about the internet, so technology and how it's going to be.
My big computer just crashed for some reason. It's never done that. So who knows? Lucky I had a backup. I didn't panic. I trusted myself to get my laptop out and just log back on.
And there you go.
The worst case scenario was we would have finished it without you, and that's not so bad. And so if you look at the worst case scenarios, they're generally not that bad. You know what I mean? Like, so, yeah.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. But I just wanted to thank all three of you on that for being here today. Thanks, Angela, Lisa, and Scott.
Thank you.
Yeah, good work, guys.
Thank you very much, Alan.
Yeah, the old elbows are up there.
Beautiful. It was a great conversation. Thanks, guys. I really enjoyed listening to you.
And I'll just remind everybody out there again, Thursday nights at 8 o'clock on the Campfire Project. Check in there. You'll see Scott will be going live. You'll have different guests each week talking about issues, and you'll have a chance to ask all your questions at that time as well.
Yeah, very much so. And I'm open to panelists. If anybody would like to join me, feel free. You know, we're just going to take questions from the audience, and it is what it is. Yeah. It's a free for all, but it's a good place to be.
That's it. So all the people who have done a one-on-one so far, get into the panels. And if you haven't had a one-on-one yet, you want to get into these panel discussions, have a one-on-one. You can have them with Angela, you can have them with Scott, you can have them with myself. And as we grow, we'll have more people doing that as well. So if somebody's invited you in, hopefully that person will be able to do a one-on-one with you as well, and we can get you into the panels as well. Because the more people we've got in here, we've got more ideas, different ways of looking at things, and that variety just really gives us a lot more knowledge to be able to draw on when we're working through things. So again, thanks guys for being here, and for everybody else who's been listening in. I hope you got a lot out of it. And if you've got any questions, put them in the comments field down below so that we can answer those. But remember, you've connected with these three guys emotionally in this time. If you have some stuff going on, get in touch with them, and me as well if you need to. But utilize the people that are coming onto the panel discussions, because you're hearing them, you've heard them before as one-on-ones, you know their knowledge, you know their passion and where their hearts are. So take advantage of it. Don't do it on your own.
Yeah,
definitely.
Okay, thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.
Thanks, Helen. Bye, everyone.